Hello, welcome to another Musing on video. So, as with all these videos, it just gives me a good way to talk generally about a subject or domain or topic that interests me. And they're nice to do at the moment because they don't require a lot of cognitive effort to some degree. It's just me remembering stuff. At some point, I wouldn't mind getting back into some of the more in-depth videos and videos that require a little bit more background, homework and research. But at the moment, that's not something really I'm going to do much of. But I thought what would be interesting is with these musing on videos is for some of them to provide a way in for people that are interested in what sort of resources I use to do stuff. So hopefully you can use this in a similar way and go down the route of self-directed learning. So that's what I'm hoping to do with some of these musings on, beyond ones where I'm just talking generally about a topic, is, it's me just offering up online resources that I use for self-directed learning, but without me having to then do that process and then produce a video at the end of it, if that makes sense. At least for the moment, for a while yet. So, why am I doing Python? Well, it did come up when I put out one of my or the going forward requests for suggestions video. It did come up about programming videos because I know I've done them in the past, and it came up about Python, and I think my answer was, leave it with me. I'll see what I can do. So as an interim, this is my sort of best shot on this. I don't really know if I'm going to return to doing videos like I did for, say, Rust or the Learn to Code to Learn videos, because they just do require an awful lot of time really to put together, and effort and brain power. So I'll run with some of these for a while, and I'll do, if people like this sort of style, then I've got no problem people suggesting up other languages and then me doing other musings on to show where you can get hold of resources to learn about language. So for this one, it's very much retrospective. I'm going to go through and try and explain over the years the sort of resources I've tapped on to learn Python, because I think Python, I was trying to think whether it was the first language that I learnt where it wasn't something that I had either signed up and handed money over for a course as part of something like the Open University, or had learnt sort of exclusively through just sitting there with a book and working through exercises. It was probably the first language where I took a bit more of an ad hoc multimedia approach and really leveraged internet resources. I'm just trying to think as I'm chatting here whether there's anything else that came before that, which is the case, and I don't think so. Languages I've learned subsequently, that is the case. They've been a mixed bag, and still with some I have done formal courses. But with Python, when I first learnt it, it was very much, bits here, bits there, downloading the environment from the internet, and proceeding with what resources are out there. Now later I went on and did a formal Python course, which we'll talk about at the end, because I think this course is really good. And at points in between I'll talk about other little mini things which I did again after I'd initially learnt Python. So it's important to bear in mind here that initially my exposure to Python was really sort of ad hoc, and I'd, learnt it off the back of learning other languages, and it wasn't really until after I'd learnt the core language then I started to do actual courses on it. So this is going to be a sort of mixture of showing you the different resources that you might find useful, and different sort of rabbit holes you can go down. So obviously the best starting point for all of this is the Python website, and you can go here and go into the beginner's guide, which is the best start, and it will walk you through, downloading Python, how to get hold of it, and then it'll walk you through some simple tutorials. That's a good, a good a starting point as any. Now, another situation you may find yourself in is you may already have, an IDE installed, or, Python may be all installed already, and you just haven't, gone down, specifically tried to learn it in any way. And one thing I wanted to talk about before I sort of got on to, stuff outside of the Python website for learning materials, is just talk very quickly about the whole issue of IDEs. Now, over the years, I've used different integrated development environments for Python, both in terms of just using idle, which comes with, the base install of Python, which is basically just just the really, really stripped down Python's integrated development and learning environment. So there are obviously other integrated learning development environments. I mean, one route to go down is to basically, if you've got Visual Studio Code, install Python and then install a plugin. And the nice thing about this page on the python.org wiki is it has all these sort of links to the various IDE areas, or resources, should I say, and about how to install them. I'm just looking down here and seeing over the years, what I've dabbled around with. NetBeans. I think that's because I was already messing around with Java, so I had it on a system, and so tweaked it in some way. I can't remember how, because it's been a while now since I've used NetBeans to do Python. I've not used PyCharm that much. I think I may have installed it once. Be careful with some of these IDs that you do. If you want the free version, some of them have a community edition specifically for that you want to install. I mentioned Python for VS Code. Spider I use quite a bit, but it does come integrated in Anaconda, which is currently if I'm installing like an environment to work in, and it's got more than just Python in Anaconda. That's the one I tend to install. Again, with that, you just have to be careful you get the free version. There's also something called Miniconda as well. But yeah, currently I think on both machines I use to do Python code, I've got Anaconda in some form installed. But full disclosure, I do tend to switch between or just use Spider, which is, like I say, was part of the Anaconda package when I installed it, and Visual Studio Code, and I sort of, for various reasons, work between the two. And that's because for the course I'm going to talk about at the end, I used Visual Studio Code. But I think day to day, particularly on my laptop, I tend to be using Spider if it's not part of a course where I'm having to use Visual Studio Code. Also, there's versions of Visual Studio Code that I've used online as well. So that's why I tend to sort of keep my hand in using it. I don't know if I don't see anaconda listed here at all, actually, which is interesting. Yeah. But, yeah, I mean, you can just install Spider. If you don't want all the other stuff, I mean, Anaconda comes with the, what's it called now, the notebook stuff, Jupyter Notebooks as well. And I think that was because I was playing around with Jupyter Notebooks for quite a while, which is a really, cool interactive way to learn Python. I found really useful, and I found it particularly useful for when I was sort of learning it via data science as well. But I suppose overall here, my point is that if you want to break out from just using, what's with Python, there's a number of really good IDEs that are worth, checking out and experimenting with. But like I said, just make sure, you do make sure that there is a free version or a community version of it if you don't want to be paying a subscription or a one-off fee, those sort of things. So once you've got your setup, a good place to start, I think, for beginners is actually this. I've used this several times for different reasons, just to work through ideas. There was a course I did which had a version of this that it used to teach the course, not specifically W3 schools, but just used a similar concept where it sort of walked you through with examples, explained things, got you to do a quiz, try out the examples, and then it tell you whether you were wrong or right, and then you just carried on through. So this is a fairly, well-established way of learning languages that are out there, and this isn't the only site that does it like this. But it is nice if you just want to work through in a systematic way over a period of time, learning different aspects of the language. So like I said, there was one course I did which leveraged this sort of learning environment very effectively, actually. Another really useful thing, and I've used this for other languages, is exercism. With Python, the nice thing as well, it has tutorial exercises and learning exercises alongside the challenges. So is the case with some languages on here. Some of the languages only have like a challenge you can do, so they describe what you need to do, and then you're sort of on your own. With some of the languages which are more established, better known, and people have been writing contributions, then there's more of a learning path with tutorial exercises. And so there's one for Python. I've used this for a number of different languages, as part of that code to learn to code thing I was doing. And so it will walk you through, I'm not logged in at the moment, the various exercises, and there might be, in the case of Python, there's a video that you can watch, some text you can read, and then there's like normally some sort of practical test. Now depending on the language, it may involve you writing sections of code or functions as well. So again, a good way of learning in a sort of bite-sized way, but this is a little bit more problem-based than, say, necessarily this. You're sort of learning, so this is orientated around the different structures and syntax and features of the language, whereas this is more about, there's this particular problem that they've made up. How could you solve parts or all of that problem in Python? So there's one here for blackjack, and it sort of describes how you might go across, how you might go through in terms of what parts of the language you might need in order to solve the problem, which is like a comparison problem. Now, with a lot of exorcism problems in languages, there's more than one way of solving it. And so you might find that there's discussions along the way about what different ways you can do this. Particularly in languages where there may be both a comparison operator type way or something that's more mathematical versus something that's more like a pattern matching structure or a case structure or something like that. And so that's really handy. And then also what you'll notice when you're going through this is there's community solutions as well to different things. And again, with some of the languages, and this changes over time as stuff gets more established, and some of the exercises as well, in certain languages, you'll find that it can give you tips about how to make your code more efficient and more idiomatic. Now, another way you can learn Python, and several years ago I learned quite a bit this way, is to learn it as an adjunct to something else. So I learned quite a bit when I was doing a data science course with Microsoft. Unfortunately, I don't think that Microsoft course exists anymore. It was originally on edX, but they do have free data science courses on Microsoft now. And you can see there's a section in here working with Python, but there's also other instances where it leverages Python and Python libraries. So yeah, one approach is to do a course in something like, say, data science or data analytics, which has a heavy Python component. And so that's quite a useful way of learning a language like Python, is learning it in an environment where it's used really heavily. And so this is, like I said, I've done a similar course to this, not this course specifically, but yeah, this is one approach. And you normally find these sorts of courses around, 10 to 12 weeks with like multiple quizzes and lessons and other things, videos. Another way is to use something like this. So this is, I'm trying to remember the name of the publisher. Is it Peach Pit? I think so. It might be. Anyway, not that it's important, but this particular book, which is Automate the Boring Stuff with Python, is free to read. And it will just walk you through. No Starch, that's it. I always get the two confused. It's No Starch, not Peach Pit. Peach Pit were the other publisher that I used to use a lot back in the day. This is 2020 edition. Yeah. And you can sort of work your way through this. Obviously, you will need to have installed Python. I don't know if it actually does talk a little bit about the REPL. But yeah, this is a free book that's well respected for learning Python. This isn't. I'll come on to basically any what book I've used in the past, but I didn't want to mention it. I didn't want to mention it as my first choice because it's rather out of date now. Yeah. So if you're looking for something more up to date, then this is a good one. And like I said, it's free. The other one, which you may well have to pay for, I don't know whether this is out there somewhere online in free format, which is Python Crash Course. This came out in 2022. I do have a copy of this for my sort of programming library, but I didn't specifically use this to sort of learn Python. I already knew Python before I got this, but it's such a cool book. There's so many really good examples in it, and it's nice to have on my sort of programming bookshelf to dip into. Now, one book that I did systematically go through is this. I really like these cookbooks actually, but this, as I said, this is rather out of date now. It's 2013, so 10 years as of when this video is going out. But I do really like the way cookbooks are laid out, and the fact they sort of discuss the problem, think about things. Now, the problem with these cookbooks is that when they're old like this, obviously, even though this is for version 3 of Python, there's obviously been newer versions come out of version 3, and also things that are considered probably to be more idiomatic of Python, or better ways of doing things, or faster ways of doing things, or stuff that can be done using certain libraries now. So just be a bit cautious. But some of the sort of what I call like basement level Python tricks that you can do, often these are good ways of discovering those things. And then what you can do is refactor your code, is another way to do that. So that can be a learning exercise in and of itself. And I know when I was trying to learn, I think it was Scala, as something a problem I hit, but I actually found it really useful to learn about how to refactor earlier versions of Scala. And I actually turned into a really good learning experience. So yeah, this is a book I've worked through before. I've got an ebook copy of it that I picked up from Humble Bundle when they were doing other cookbooks which are more up to date. Now, another possible way is using LinkedIn Learning, but if you're like me and don't necessarily want to pay for the courses, one thing you can do is a lot of libraries, if you belong to a library, so this is the one for Halifax Library in Nova Scotia, and they actually, you can through your library card actually get access to LinkedIn Learning, and so there's tons of Python stuff on there. And yeah, I've used LinkedIn Learning a lot just to again refresh me. Some of these have stuff you can download, code examples, but certainly there's loads of coding walkthroughs, and I used to quite like just watching some of these. A lot of the videos can be quite short as well, so sometimes I'd like watch these at lunchtime when I was working. And there's quite a number. There's also I imagine here there is a Python, they have these learning paths on here, so I suspect there is still some sort of learning path that incorporates Python in some way. It's basically been quite a while since I've used any of the LinkedIn Learning stuff specifically for that. I think the last time I did it was probably for Ruby, I think. But prior to that I had used it a lot, particularly where I wanted to learn, again, a certain application of a language in a certain domain as maybe part of something else. So, like in the case of Python, stuff to do with like the NumPy library, those sort of things. So yeah, now it's sort of coming back to me. I can remember, like things like pandas and those sort of things as well, finding it useful for learning about the different libraries. And then finally, my last suggestion, and this is a good one to sort of cap it all, is this Harvard X one. I've got a separate video about this course, which I did nearly a year ago, probably not quite. And so I would definitely check this out. It should still be free, and in my video I sort of talk about how at the time you could still get a free certificate from Harvard, because it's done through the edX interface, but it's run by Harvard, and part of it is done on their learning platform. So there is a way in their learning platform for you to get a certificate from their learning platform without having to pay for the edX certificate. This is pretty challenging though, but it's a good thing to just really sort of cement the learning and do some interesting problem challenges. In fact, if you don't know any programming languages at all, you may want to do one of HarvardX's other introductions to computer science. Not the big one, but there is a slightly easier ones they do, which sort of get you used to coding. There's one on Scratch, I think, but there's also one that has elements of, I think there's like a little bit of HTML in it, a little bit of Python in there as well. Okay, there's a couple like that. Maybe a little bit of C, which is slightly easier than doing a sort of full-blown course where you're sort of doing quite a bit of C. But then you might want to do something like that. But yeah, there's the Python one as well now. So yeah. I mean, one way with this is they have quite a big window for you to do it. And every year it gets flipped over each year to like a new presentation of it. So there's no reason why you can't sort of start this, and if you get bogged down, go off and try something else out and then come back to it. Because stuff does carry over, but normally it tells you how much carries over and the circumstances of stuff carrying over. So yeah, those are in my musing on the episode, those are my sort of suggestions for, what ways into learning about Python. So thanks once again for watching. Bye for now, and I will catch you in a future video.